Welcome back to the channel. My name is Emory, and this channel is dedicated to helping you get better at backpacking. So if you're into that kind of thing, consider sticking around, maybe subscribing, at least check back on the channel for future videos. Today I want to talk about backpacking and hiking alone and how to go from being terrified, never doing it before, to striking out on your own for an entire backpacking trip. This is a process and one that I struggled with for a lot of years in a number of areas, but I am now to the point where I really have no trouble at all just setting out on my own and backpacking. If you fall into that category of like, man, that sounds great being alone, or you can't ever find anyone to go backpacking and hiking with, this video is really gonna help you out. If you are new to backpacking, be sure to check out my Learn How to Backpack backpacking course. It's for beginner backpackers. All online, 60 video tutorials, that kind of thing. Links are in the description. Also, I have a backpacking podcast, the My Land podcast, so be sure to check that out as well. Now, let's talk about backpacking and hiking solo or alone. Let's get you out there comfortable and on a path to having an adventure. Let's just cover the idea of why in the world you would ever want to go backpacking or hiking alone. And my simple answer to that is freedom. It is very freeing to not have to plan with someone else or deal with anyone else on the trail. Now, I backpack alone and I enjoy backpacking with other people and hunting, that kind of thing. But there's pros and cons to both, right? I didn't know this until later on that when I started going alone, I was just freed up in general. So a lot of times what would happen in the past would be I would plan this big backpacking trip or just a backpacking trip and get right up to the date of going and someone would back out. Or I could just never find anyone to go with. And now here I am left with this trip to go on with no one to go with, so I don't end up going. Well, that's no fun at all whatsoever. If you're the type of person that wants to go backpacking, then you want to go backpacking. And sometimes when you have to always go with someone, it seems like an anchor. At the end of the day, it really just comes down to more freedom in a lot of different areas. If you want to know more about this, I actually wrote an article that I will link below on how to backpack and start doing that stuff alone. I go into a lot more detail, so be sure to check out that article in the description. That should be really helpful because this is just going to be like the cliff notes. Now that you kind of know why you would want to do this kind of a thing alone, let me tell you about my personal story and how I kind of figured out the first time that I realized, whoa, this is really amazing. I had this backpacking trip planned with a friend of mine. Leading up to it, I really wasn't feeling that well. We ended up backpacking in like 6 miles or so to this lake. Woke up the next morning. We were going to continue on 2 more days, kind of do like a little through hike through the Goat Rocks Wilderness in Washington State. Woke up and I just was not feeling good. So I told him, it's like, hey, I'm going to go back to the truck. I'm going to head home. You guys continue on. The problem is that this was a new area for me. I'd never been there before. And I had to go 6 miles back to the truck all alone. I really had no other choice. I didn't have the energy or the drive to continue on. This was my only choice, and I wasn't gonna ask someone to come back with me because that's ridiculous and, well, just not gonna do it. So I started hiking 6 miles. By the time I got back to the truck, I would say like halfway back to the truck, I realized how much fun I was having. And the time went by really, really quickly, which was really shocking to me. And I got back to the truck and I was like, wow, that was actually a really good 6 miles of hiking. What is this all about? So I started kind of exploring this idea of going alone. And over a period of time, I just kind of got more and more comfortable with going to the point now, I led up to the PCT in 2017. And after that, I kind of got all the bugs out of my system and I worked on really specific portions of myself in order to be capable and comfortable, more importantly, comfortable being alone in the wilderness overnight, miles and miles into the backcountry. That is what we need to get you going towards. And everyone is on a different stage of this journey. Some people from the get-go do not have any problem being alone out there, whereas other people don't even want to go for a drive in the mountains alone. So there's this massive scale of where everyone's at in that journey. So the tips that I'm gonna give you in this video are gonna help wherever you're at on that journey. You should be able to use these tips and tricks to help get you further down that path. Because I promise you, the first time that you set out on your own for an overnight backpacking trip, regardless of how far it is, you're gonna come back and feel very, very accomplished and empowered and excited because it's gonna unlock a ton of possibilities for you. So let's dive into these tips on how to get from point A to point B. Number one, you're gonna have to ease into it. Wherever you're at on this stage, ease into it. If the idea of backpacking and hiking alone completely freaks you out, start by going for a drive in the mountains alone. That alone can be freaky, like I said. Get used to going to a trailhead. Practice that feeling of being alone and packing up your stuff and going. Try hiking a local trailhead alone where you know there's gonna be a lot of people. Get used to that feeling of being self-reliant and on your own in the wilderness with all the different noises and interacting with people. Don't go from never been alone in the woods to like 10-mile backpacking trip. That's gonna ruin your life. You're gonna end up getting overworked and it's just gonna become really heavy. So baby steps. Go from going for a drive, wherever you're at on this scale, go for a drive in the mountains, go for a hike in the mountains, and then just slowly build up your base of, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to get used to that feeling of being alone and having no one else to talk to. Before you go backpacking alone, I highly suggest you spend an entire day from sunup to sundown in the backcountry all alone, as isolated as possible. This is gonna give you a really good feeling for how the day progresses on your own. Don't just go for a couple hours. Don't just go for a 30-minute hike. Go all day long to where you have to have maybe a mid-morning snack, lunch, and then maybe eat dinner out there and then get to the trailhead. The idea is that you need to spend all day long so you know what the day feels like before you go into the night. Number two, start sleeping alone. Do not sleep in a tent with someone else. You can be in a group for the time being, but start setting up your tent by yourself alone so you get the feeling of zipping up that tent at night and being in there by yourself. The next phase of that would be setting up your tent maybe a distance away from the group that you're backpacking with. And this is, again, to get used to the idea of not having anyone in the tent with you and being alone. You have to get familiar with the idea and the feeling of being alone. And that leads me into tip number three, which is start doing stuff on your own from beginning to end. What tends to happen when we hike and backpack in a group is we don't take on all of the responsibility that is backpacking planning or various camp skills. Finding a place to camp, pitching your tent. When you have other people to rely on for that decision making, it's gonna make it really difficult to then work on those skills. If you go right into backpacking and be like, oh, I didn't know I needed to do all this stuff. My planning's all jacked up. So start doing every single bit of the planning by yourself. One awesome way to practice doing this is to bring someone who's never been backpacking for the first time. It helped me out a lot because I had to think about, oh, these other people don't know what they're doing, so I'm gonna have to plan for them, and you start going through the sequence. So it kind of empowers you. You have the knowledge, you're bringing someone, it doesn't have to be very far, but you're bringing someone inexperienced backpacking for the first time, and you see the full evolution of it. Number four, if you are finally worked up to the portion of this whole sequence where you're gonna start going alone, go somewhere familiar. Don't go somewhere that you've never been before. On your day hikes, go to the same spot. Find a spot that you want to camp at alone. Start hiking there during the day. Get familiar with the turns in the trail and the noises and maybe the different animals in the area so that you know what's in the area so that when you finally go alone, it's familiar to you. Again, we're getting used to the idea of being familiar with the idea of being alone and the noises that come with the wilderness, right? That is tip number four. Number five, when things start to get weird on the trail, distract your brain. Play a podcast, play music, play a game, take some pictures, I used to vlog for my wife, taking a picture, oh honey, look at this. Anytime your brain starts making these weird games, and it will when you're out there alone long enough, your brain is gonna start messing with you. So you have to counteract that. You have to be able to identify when your brain is messing with you and have a game plan to fight it. Anything to take your mind off the current situation. That will pass. Play some upbeat music, whatever it is, relax. Anything like that helps out a ton. So distract your brain however you can. Number six, camp where you feel safe. Don't camp in the woods for the first time alone. It's just freaking creepy, okay? I live in the Pacific Northwest, so there's a lot of trees. So I try to get up to a bluff. Early on, it was get up to a bluff so where I can see and I don't feel like the forest, once it gets dark fast in the trees. You just feel real closed in. Find an open place to camp. It makes you feel safer. Maybe butt up against a rock wall or butt up against a river. Something that makes you feel safe. Pick the campsite that makes you feel safe, not unsafe. Number 7, tire yourself out. Spend all day hiking. If you get to camp and you are not tired and you are not exhausted and you have all the brain power in the world and you're just gonna sit there for like hours and hours and hours on end, you're gonna wanna go home ASAP. You're gonna wanna pack up camp and get the heck out of Dodge. You don't have to camp at 4 o'clock in the evening and spend 3 hours at camp, because at night, in the summer, the sun doesn't go down until probably 9:30 at night, so you have a long time to hike during the day. So my advice, tire yourself out, get right up until dusk, make camp, eat some food, go to sleep. You're forcing yourself to be tired and not have any brain power to do much worrying at all. Finally, tip number 8, bring with you whatever it is that makes you feel safe. Whether that's mace, whether that's a knife, or if you're a firearm individual, bring a firearm. Whatever it is that makes you feel safe in the woods when you're all alone, bring it. We don't need to get into like what you should or shouldn't bring into the woods and that kind of thing. That doesn't really matter. It's individual. And as you continue doing this, you're not gonna need those things. So I used to bring a firearm with me all the time. I got to the point where I really didn't need one. I don't bring much protection at all because I don't live in an area that has a ton of, we don't have grizzly bears or anything like that. I bring what I need to make me feel safe. I camp in a place where I feel safe, and I watch my surroundings, and that is good enough for me. So wherever you're at on this scale, use these tips 1 through 8 to propel yourself along, because when you finally get out there by yourself, it's gonna feel amazing. You're gonna feel so proud. And I'm telling you, backpacking and hiking alone is probably one of the greatest things you'll ever do. It feels great, and it's really, really special to just immerse yourself in the woods. You see more, you take your time, you're free to do whatever you want. And it's really, really fun. I hope that was helpful. If you have any tips on how you deal with being alone, or how you got from being terrified of being alone in the woods to being fine, toss them in the comments below, because I think a lot of people could learn from other people's experiences. If you're new to backpacking, be sure to check out the course. Also check out the podcast. And if you are headed out on an adventure anytime soon, be safe, make great decisions, and we'll see you next time.